Black-eyed children or black-eyed kids is an urban legend of paranormal creatures that resemble children between the ages of 6 and 16. These creatures with pale skin and black eyes have reportedly been seen hitchhiking, panhandling, or at the doorsteps of residential homes. These children do not look threatening. They would want to get in your house or your car. They will be persistent. Suddenly, you will notice something is not right about these children. Their eyes, pure black, from lid to lid, dead black orbs devoid of sclera or iris will chill up your spine. You have finally come across the black-eyed children. No one knows where or how these creatures pop up. Conspiracy theorists believe that black-eyed children are aliens trying to reach out to their Earth. Demonologists believe they are children of the devil himself, and if you let them in, you are allowing the devil to enter your life. They want to enter your home to call their parents. However, upon making eye contact, it seems like there is a much sinister plot to the story. It is also said if you look into their eyes long enough they can hypnotize you and get control of you. Encounter with them may also bring bad luck and misery later on. Some people claim that these children have existed since the 1980s. However, most sources say that the legend originated in 1996 in posts written by a Texas reporter named Brian Bethel, where he wrote about 2 alleged encounters with the black-eyed children. He said that he encountered 2 children in Abilene, Texas, with pale skin and black eyes. In 2012, Bethel retold his story on the TV show Monsters and Mysteries in America. He then wrote an article for the Abilene Reporter News where he described his experience again. One of the stories goes like this. First story. In a snowy town, within the middle of nowhere of Vermont, an elderly couple heard the sound of 3 loud knocks on their door. They opened the door and saw 2 children, a boy and a girl. "Parents will be here soon. May we come in?" The children did not make eye contact and just stood there in the doorway. The elderly couple were hesitant, but after a while, they let the boy and girl inside. The kids settled on the couch while the wife made some hot cocoa and the husband asked them questions that went unanswered. The wife returned and noticed that her cat was scared and angry with the children. "May we please use the restroom?" The wife looked at the kids and she finally saw them. The children's eyes were as black as a starless universe. She directed them to the bathroom and returned to her husband, who was covering his face with his hand. "Did you see their eyes?" The husband then showed her his hand full of blood from a nosebleed. The power suddenly went out and the house turned as dark as the kids' eyes. The wife headed to the restroom and was confronted by the voice of the kids at the end of the hall uttering, "Our parents are here." The kids then exited the house, leaving the door wide open. The wife then noticed that there were 2 men at the end of the driveway. The men were very tall and slender. The wife waved but did not receive the same friendly gesture. The 2 men and children then drove away together in one car. The power then came back on a little later after the kids left. Throughout the next week, weird things happened in the house. 3 out of 4 cats went missing and the 4th had been found dead in the pool of its blood. The husband continued to have nosebleeds and finally went to the doctor, where he was diagnosed with very aggressive skin cancer. This legend even crossed bodies of water and landed in the great land of the UK, where in 2014, the Daily Star wrote 3 front-page stories about sightings of the black-eyed children in the haunted pub in Staffordshire. Ghost hunters who believed that the black-eyed children were extraterrestrials, vampires or ghosts took these alleged sightings very seriously. Nowadays, people still claim to see the black-eyed children when driving late at night down an empty road, or outside of their window late at night, or even lurking in the shadows of their room. Many people have reported seeing the black-eyed children standing in the corner of their room during their episodes of sleep paralysis, or even waking up in the middle of the night because they sensed someone was watching them, and in the shadows were these children. Second story. This story was shared by Jennifer Rose Sundquist on Quora, so credits to her. This experience totally happened to me in January 2015. I didn't even know what a black-eyed kid was at the time. I was always a night owl, into playing video games, surfing the net and reading books well into the night. At that time, we were living in a three-plex condo, in the center unit. All of them were two-story, a few miles outside of town and sheltered in isolation just off the old highway. So it would have been really difficult for somebody to walk that far down to our development and know whose porch to approach. It was about 2 a.m. and it had been storming big time on the Oregon coast that night. The wind was whipping through the area and we'd had sideways rain going on for days. I was sitting in my room with a little stained glass lamp on that wasn't much brighter than a night light. I was also burning a candle. The house was perfectly quiet and appeared to be asleep, except for me. That's when I began to hear our front screen door creaking. It sounded like it was being slowly and carefully opened. Whoever was out there at that time of night, in those conditions, seemed to know about the squeaky door and was trying to open it as quietly as possible, about an inch at a time. I kept listening for the sound, making sure it wasn't the wind. But I kept hearing a little hinge creak, and then another creak, until it was obvious that it was very deliberate. Whoever was out there doing this knew exactly what they were doing. And for whatever reason, chose not to ring the illuminated doorbell right next to the front door. All of this was going through my mind in rapid, terrifying detail and freaking me out to the real threat that I was about to be confronted by a very bold intruder. I breezed around the corner of my room, which was on the bottom floor, closest to the front porch, and made my way toward the door. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew somebody was definitely out there. My husband at the time was sleeping upstairs and probably passed out cold. He was a doctor who was always on call and kept long hours, so I hesitated to wake him or get the police involved until I knew for sure what to report. I stood silently in front of the door, armed with my phone and a baseball bat, waiting to see what, if anything, would happen next. Roughly 2 minutes later, I saw the front door knob being turned slowly, like someone was trying to manipulate the door open. It was locked, but since whoever was out there had taken the time to quietly get that far, I felt pretty confident that they were about to take it much further. The old front door we had at the time didn't have a peephole. It just had this little bit of glass over the top of it that only a 7-foot-tall person would be able to look through. My only alternative was to look through a side 3-foot-long by 6 narrow window just adjacent to the door. I kept the lights off and slowly tried to move the little curtain just enough to peek out onto the front porch. As soon as I did, I was shocked to see a figure cloaked in a hoodie staring straight back at me. I was overcome with a feeling of dread and panic. At that point, I flipped on all the lights inside the house and yelled through the door, "Who are you and what do you want?" There was no answer. I repeated myself and asked, "Are you injured or is there someone I can call for you?" By then, it was at least 2:30 in the morning. There was still no response. So I ran around quickly and made sure the windows and back doors were locked. I also went to the top of the stairs to look out the hallway window to the parking area to see if there were any foreign cars or any other figures hiding out in the darkness. I couldn't see anything unusual anywhere. I ran back down to the front door and yelled, "I'm calling the police now." Finally, I heard what sounded like a woman in a monotone voice say, "I need you to open the door and let me in." I was dumbfounded and choking on fear, but I asked her why, what was wrong, and if she needed me to make a call for her. I asked if she was hurt, but I got no reply. So I informed her that my husband was home and sleeping upstairs. I told her I would wake him up and started yelling for him. She interrupted my shouts with a cryptic, robotic reply, "I'm not hurt. I need to come inside. I have something to give you." I was flipping out of my mind by now, but I pulled the curtains all the way back on the side window, turned the front porch light on and asked her to show me through the glass. She turned around and I could see that she was holding this perfectly coiffed, long-haired Pomeranian, wearing a beautiful, purple collar that had a gold, fancy medallion with the dog's name, etc., engraved on the front. She must have known that. At that point, she said to me, "I'm here to give you back your dog. Let me in and I'll give him to you." I snapped back, "That's not my dog, lady. Look at his collar. My dogs are right here with me. And both of them were sitting right beside me, standing guard, but keeping strangely silent. She said again in her creepy way, "I just want to give you back your dog." It felt like I was in the Twilight Zone on steroids. I said, "Look at the dog's tag. Where did you find this dog?" "That's not my dog, but I will make a phone call to its rightful owner if you tell me the number on the tag." I was becoming more concerned about the dog, being a devoted dog lover, and the fact that this disturbing person wasn't actually its owner. She didn't move, and I noticed that the dog she was carrying was being unusually still as well. It wasn't acting upset, anxious, or trying to get away from her. It didn't make any sense. It was the most peculiar situation I'd ever seen. But the feeling was ominous and dark. I started looking carefully at this girl so that I could give details to the police, in case she took off with the dog. I could see that she was a thin younger girl, possibly a late teenaged girl. She had straight, dark hair, covered by the red hoodie she was wearing, and a dark pair of blue jeans on. It was impossible to see her eyes. I reached into a nearby coat closet for a flashlight. Just then she said, "If you would just open the door and take a look at the dog to make sure it's not yours, I'll leave." I grabbed a knife from the kitchen, held my phone tightly, and walked back toward the door. My dogs never moved. I figured I'd take a close look and slam the door if I had to. I figured if she was unarmed, I might have a chance of grabbing the dog and getting him to its rightful owner. So I said to her, "I've got my phone and I'm ready to call the police if you try anything. Step back from the door and I'll take a look at the dog." I pulled the front door open slowly and took a long, careful look. The dog appeared to be exceptional and perfect, like it had just come from winning first prize at an AKC dog show. It was obviously someone's prized pet and not just a stray dog she found, or one I'd ever seen around before. I told her it wasn't mine, again. As I did, she took one step toward the door, and I noticed she was holding something in her left hand behind her back, while her other hand supported the full weight of the dog. She kept looking down at her feet and remained silent. I asked her to put the dog down. As I said that, she glanced back toward the road and the parking area. But I didn't see anyone or any cars there. I asked her again to put the dog down and leave the front porch area. I said I would let the dog in as soon as she did and would get it back to its rightful owner. At that point, she looked up at me and seemed to stare right through me with her cold, dead, penetrating eyes. I have never seen anything more bizarre in my life. Her eyes were jet black and her hollow stare was fixated on me, like I was being examined or called to some kind of a challenge. My hands were trembling and it was all I could do not to throw up. She didn't seem drunk or on drugs of any kind. She seemed surreal, and in my mind I kept thinking of the Grim Reaper. I was hearing the words to the Lord's Prayer and struggling not to make eye contact with her. There was something very unnatural and menacing about her eyes, her intensity, and her odd, calculated, cold behavior. I couldn't figure it out. I shut the door and started screaming for my husband to come downstairs. He finally came down. I yelled to him, "Hurry! There's somebody standing on the front porch. She's got someone else's dog. She keeps saying it's mine. I think she's carrying something behind her back. There's something very wrong with her. Be careful." I called 911 as he opened the front door. But she was already gone and there was no sign of her anywhere. We even got in the car and drove around. The police couldn't find her either, and they couldn't find any reports on a missing woman or a missing dog anywhere in the state. The incident haunted me, so I decided to research lost pets with that description and any reports of women or girls like her in the area that might have been reported or listed nationwide. But I couldn't find anything. Curiously, the only thing that kept coming up was a new sighting of the so-called black-eyed kids in the Portland, Oregon and North Coastal area where I was living at the time. I'd never heard of anything like that. But when I saw the pictures that other people had posted and read some of the similar, chilling reports, my heart froze. She looked exactly like that. I don't know what else I could tell you. But I'll never forget it. I'm not sure what her purpose was. But I feel like she targeted me because of the fact that I was isolated and known for having my dogs with me everywhere. I would do anything to protect a dog or a helpless animal. Somehow I think she knew that. But it'll always be a creepy mystery. Third story. This story was shared by Kane1212 on Reddit, so credits to him. I am simply trying to warn people that some things out in this world are beyond our comprehension, and if you hear a knock at the door, make sure you check before opening it. I wish I had. Here's my story. My girlfriend and I live in a small gated community in southern West Virginia called Glade Springs. The community has about 150 houses, a country club, and a steakhouse/bar called Bunkers. Now anyone can come through the gate during the business hours of Bunkers, but after they close, the front security gate stops all traffic and makes sure you are a resident, and if you're a visitor they call the house that you're going to verify that you are actually expecting them. Sometimes it's a hassle, but hey, don't have to worry about a robbery. So imagine my surprise when my doorbell chimed at 3 a.m. I was jarred awake and wasn't sure if it wasn't just a dream, considering I had just went to bed shortly before and was probably just going into REM sleep. I rolled over and looked at the clock, noticing the time, and when my doorbell chimed again I felt a cold chill run through my body. Not reading too much into it, it could be one of my neighbors has an emergency, right? I nonchalantly made my way to the door. Now I see how foolish I really was, and opened it. Luckily the wrought iron storm door was still locked, because who or what stood before me was not a resident of the community. Two young boys stood at my doorstep, one looking about 17 and another looking about 10, wearing dark hooded sweatshirts and jeans. The young one had shaggy dirty blonde hair and would only look down at the stone steps, and the older one had his hood pulled and his head tipped to where I could only see from half his nose down. My voice caught in my throat, and before I could even ask what they wanted, the older one spoke. His voice sounded forced and dry. There was no emotion or sincerity of what he said. "I'm sorry to bother you and your girlfriend, but we need to come in and use your phone. We've been in an accident." I felt the familiar chill return to my whole body. How did he know my girlfriend was here? I wrote it off as my Tahoe and her VW was in the driveway, and I figured they just assumed. I tripped over my words. Something about these kids wasn't right, wasn't normal, wasn't human. I can bring you my cell phone and you can call. I don't get service inside here, so you have to stand on the sidewalk to call. I finally said nervously. Of course I was lying through my clenched teeth. I did not want these kids in my house. "Well, my brother really needs to use your bathroom, Kane. We have to come in," the older one said. And that's when I went into complete a panic. He knew my name. "I'm sorry, are you from here? How did you know my name?" The words practically shook out of my mouth. That's when he became slightly hostile and demanded to be let inside. And I told them I was sorry, but I couldn't help them, and just as I was about to close the main door is when it happened. The both of them snapped their heads upwards and looked me straight in the eyes. Black. No iris, no pupil, no retina, just pure deep black. I was paralyzed with fear. For a second I thought those kids were just playing a really cruel joke and had snuck in the community somehow and had bought some of those freaky supernatural demon scare contacts. That was until I heard ringing. It was like a ringing sound that you hear when you have a hearing test done, that digital high-pitched shrill ringing, and then the flashback started. I was suddenly a toddler again at my grandparents' house, sitting under the chestnut tree with my mother picking up the nuts and putting them in a large metal soup kettle. It was a crisp fall day. It's one of my earliest and dearest memories. I was about 3, and even have a picture, and one I hold very near to my heart. But then they were there, behind my mother. We locked eyes, their eyes still black as night, and suddenly they smiled simultaneously. That's when everything went black. The next thing I knew, I was shaken awake, lying in the mudroom floor, my girlfriend standing over me with a worried look. "What the hell, Kane?" she asked. I had no idea how to answer her. My head had taken a good whack against the slate floor and a bit of dry blood was stuck in my hair, but other than that I was fine physically. I slowly remembered everything that had happened and looked at the door. Daylight. I've never been so happy to see morning in all my life. I told my girlfriend everything that had happened, and I honestly think she thought I had brain damage from hitting the floor, but she insisted she believed me. And then we Googled it, and I believe that's when she really started to believe me, was then. I don't know who or what they are, or where they come from, but they're not of this world. I know that for a fact. For some reason I had a lingering thought. I'm still not sure if they put the thought in my head or not, that they wanted me to know that even my memories aren't safe. They are very strong and seem to be growing in numbers. For some reason they seem to not be able to hurt you physically unless you invite them in, which I don't know, since either no one has ever let them or the ones that have aren't around to tell their story anymore. But they can get your mind. Since that night I feel as though I'm being watched. I see them out of the corner of my eye occasionally. I'll look at my girlfriend while we're at the movies or diner and her eyes will be solid black for a split second, and worst of all, they took one of my most precious and most often reminisced memories and turned it into something sinister, something that's now a constant reminder of the black-eyed children.